democracy and people's action for movement politics.
Woo!
I couldn't hear that.
And will you join with the New Hampshire youth movement while we work to let the people win back their democracy?
Yes.
Woo!
For those of you who want to join Rights and Democracy, we have a table on your way out, and we would love to have you pick up some materials. And in fact, we have a membership meeting coming up November 16th in Brattleboro, which is not far from New Hampshire, so you can all come over. And we'd love to have you join us.
And for those of you who want to join New Hampshire Youth Movement, we've got a bunch of stuff coming up too. We have trainings on November 10th in Manchester and Keene. The next climate strike will be December 6th. We have our party at the primaries activities in January. And if you want to sign up or donate, you can go to nhyouthmovement.org.
That's right. And you can catch Isaac. Where's Isaac? Isaac, raise your hand. You can catch Isaac in the back there with any questions about rights and democracy.
And Dylan, raise your hand. You can talk to Dylan for more information about getting involved with New Hampshire Youth Movement. So join us.
As we say,
I believe that we will win. 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 I believe that we will win.
Hi everybody, my name is Katie Morse-Gagne. I use she, her, hers pronouns, and I am a field organizer with the New Hampshire Youth Movement, living in the Manchester Movement House. Thank you. I am especially in this work because of the climate crisis. I'm originally from northern New Hampshire, up in Bath, but my family moved to Mississippi in the summer of 2005, which is a date that rings for a lot of people. It's about 2 weeks before Hurricane Katrina hit that we moved down there. And then Katrina hit the Gulf Coast, and I saw devastation in the communities near me. In my state and in surrounding states, communities were just being torn apart and were not being given the resources that they needed to rebuild. And in that moment, when I was 8 years old, and in the 14 years since then, as I've learned more about how that devastation fits into a pattern of climate injustice, and of racism and classism and corruption and an absolute refusal to act, that's what has committed me to doing this work. That's why I'm here today. That's why I'm here with the New Hampshire Youth Movement. We know that the people in this room and people all across the world in my generation have got to stand up and do this work, and we've got to do it now. Yeah.
Hi everybody, my name's Ravel, and I use she and they pronouns. I'm also an organizer based in Manchester with New Hampshire Youth Movement. Yeah, and I'm originally from California, and as many of you may know, California has been hit hard this week by climate crisis-fueled wildfires. So yeah, hurricane force winds fueled the Kincaid fire in my home county, Sonoma County, and whipped the wildfire into a fire. Fire first, it was progressing at a rate of 1 football. 200,000 people had to evacuate in my home. 70,000 people had to evacuate in Southern California, seeing 2 other wildfires. While all of this was going on, 1 million or more people lost power, so they were having to evacuate in the middle of the night with no power, packing what little they could with flashlights. Yeah, not only have the wildfires been fueled by the climate crisis, but PG&E, the utility that supplies our electricity, has caused these fires by not upkeeping the grid. Instead of upkeeping the grid and protecting our safety and well-being, they've been lining the pockets of wealthy investors. That ain't right. A year ago, I couldn't take it anymore, and I quit my engineering job to get involved in politics full-time. Since then, I've found hope. I found hope in the movement around me, I found hope in the people that I've met across this country. I found hope in the stories that we tell and the songs that we sing.
And speaking of those songs, yeah. Speaking of those songs, we use songs a lot in this work and in this movement to unite us in these rooms and as we hold actions and do all of this work together. And that's a really big part of our way to build community and just, unite with one another. So we want to sing another song with everyone. We also know that we also really value sharing songs' histories and giving credit to the moments and the movements that songs come out of. And so we want to sing a song called Woke Up This Morning.
Yeah, and Woke Up This Morning was written in the 1960s by Reverend Robert Wesby of Aurora, Illinois. He wrote it while he was in the Hinds County Jail during the Freedom Rides. If you don't know, the Freedom Rides were a civil rights movement campaign to desegregate public buses. It was adapted from an old gospel song, I Woke Up This Morning with My Mind Stayed on Jesus.
And we want to emphasize that this is not about whether you think that you have a beautiful singing voice. This is for everyone to join in singing and just making a loud and joyful noise and being all a part of this in this room together.
Yeah, and you all should have half sheets on your seat or the person next to you so you can share.
Lyrics and histories. Stand up. Everybody stand.
Everybody stand up.
If you're able, yeah. Woke up this morning with my mind set on freedom. Woke up this morning with my mind set on freedom. Woke up this morning with my mind set on freedom. Hallelujah, hallelujah, hallelujah. Woke up this morning with my mind set on justice. Woke up this morning with my mind set on justice. Woke up this morning with my mind set on justice. Hallelujah, hallelujah, hallelujah. Courage. Woke up this morning with my mind set on courage. Woke up this morning with my mind set on courage. Woke up this morning with my mind set on courage. Hallelujah, hallelujah, hallelujah.
Awesome. Thank you so much. This concludes our first event, the New Hampshire People's Issue Forum. And let's give it up for our storytellers and speakers, please. We're now going to conclude this event and shift to event number 2 of the day, which is our conversation with presidential candidate Senator Bernie Sanders. I'm leaving. I'm coming back. Hi. Welcome to our second event of the day. Again, my name is Amy Hathaway, and I'm a leader with Rights and Democracy and People's Action. Let's begin our conversation with Bernie Sanders. This is an event that Senator Sanders' campaign is hosting and paying for, but they've asked us to create the program for it. This is a public event. We asked other candidates to join us in similar events, but none of them have yet committed to come meet with us in this way. We've met with 5 candidates in multi-issue forums, as Ryan said earlier, and have started to invite candidates to meet with us one-on-one. And Senator Sanders was the first to say yes. So our format for this part will be asking the senator to open and close with some thoughts on two questions we've shared with him in advance. One on activism and one on movement politics. In between, we'll have teams of people come up and share stories and questions about a variety of themes. Each issue area will have 5 to 6 minutes total, just to give you an idea. We ask that everyone be respectful of the candidate, and as we are with all candidates who are coming before us to have conversations. I'll hand it back to Quincy. Great.
Thank you, Amy. Okay, now I would like to invite Senator Bernie Sanders to the stage. Yes, please leave room in the aisle. Welcome, Senator Sanders. We're gonna first give you 2 minutes for your opening remarks centered around your foundation in activism. But first, I wanna ground us a little bit in what the heck activism is. It's kind of a scary, nuanced word for a lot of people. So to me, fundamentally, activism means not being satisfied or complacent with what you see around you. And so that means fighting for systemic socio-political change and reform, like we've been discussing and will continue to discuss today. For me, activism started in really small ways before I even knew what it was. Since I was in middle school, I remember telling my friends, classmates, and basically anyone around me who would listen to stop calling things they didn't like gay. Fast forward a couple years, and actually, exactly 4 years ago on this day, Halloween, I went out into my community and knocked doors for the first time. So, yes, it is the 4-year anniversary, very perfect. So big or small, official or unofficial, these were both forms of activism. And what they have in common is talking to your friends, your neighbors, and most importantly, to strangers. Because our capitalist society has taught us that whatever happens in our lives is our own fault, because we didn't work harder and pull ourselves up by our bootstraps, and so we have no one else to blame. But that's not true. We are facing similar hardships because these problems are systemic, not individual. And so we need to come together and rise up in order to make change. But how can we expect to do that if we're not talking about the ways the system has failed us? If we're not talking about the things that we, as the 99%, have in common? That is what activism means to me. That is how we're going to build a movement and a revolution, and I hope you will all join me in starting those conversations in your own communities. So, thank you. So, Senator Sanders, in introducing yourself, please tell us about the first moment of activism you participated in. What did you do? What did you learn from it? And how did it move you?
Thank you, Amy. Well, let me first congratulate Rights and Democracy here in New Hampshire for the extraordinarily important work you are doing, and the New Hampshire Youth Movement as well. As Amy just indicated, our job now is to bring millions of working class people and young people into the political process to finally create a government and an economy that works for all of us, not just the 1%. And the question of what motivates me, and let me tell you very honestly what has always motivated me. I grew up in a working class family, a family that struggled economically every single day. I lived in a rent-controlled apartment in Brooklyn, New York. I know where I come from, and I know about the struggles that millions of people in our country are experiencing today who, like my family, lived paycheck to paycheck. So you want to know what experience motivated me? It was growing up in a family that didn't have enough money. And that's the experience I will take with me to the White House. I don't have a super PAC. I don't want a super PAC. Our campaign is going to be fueled by the working families of our country, and it is going to transform our economy so that it works for all of us and not just wealthy campaign contributors. And I want to say to the people of New Hampshire, a very special thanks, and it's not just from me personally. It's that this state has played a profound role in transforming the political conversation of this country. And that is 4 years ago when I came to the state, and I talked about raising that minimum wage to $15 an hour, making public colleges and universities tuition free, making clear that healthcare is a human right and not a privilege, and understanding that climate change is the existential threat to not only our country, but to the entire planet. The establishment told me that those ideas were too wild and extreme, but the people of New Hampshire did not.
Thank you so much, Senator Sanders. Thank you so much.
Okay.
Yeah. Now let's jump into our issue-based questions,
Good.
okay? First up, we're hearing about healthcare and the overdose crisis.
Sorry. I'm Brenda Siegel from Newfane, Vermont. I'm a member of Rights and Democracy. Just 2 weeks ago was the anniversary of my brother's death. He died 23 years ago while using heroin. His son, my nephew, lost his life after a long battle with opioid use disorder in March of 2018. What I know is that my family did everything we could, everything that was available to us. He and we tried really hard. Kaya had support, and still, he died after a year in recovery, derailed by the criminal justice system. The system failed him and us, as it has so many others. Parents are burying their children across this country in mass numbers. There are mass graves of our children across this country. My nephew, Kaya Siegel, became a statistic in the overdose crisis. My family's outcome has been determined, but we are not moving fast enough to change that outcome for others. Families like mine do not get our loved ones back.
You're just listening. Okay. My name is Jody Newell from Keene, New Hampshire, and I'm also a member of Rights and Democracy. On Christmas Eve 2008, I lost my fiance, my children's father, to opiate overdose. Corey tried so hard, but at the same time as he navigated recovery, he was navigating the criminal justice system, facing a 10-year mandatory minimum prison sentence. The way I see it, the casualties of this war on drugs are our neighbors. It's our children, it's our nephews, right? Yet we've criminalized and condemned the very people we seek to protect. As this failed war on drugs rages on, my kids are growing up, and I'm scared as hell. And I think if everyone could look at these boys, look at these victims like I look at my boys, if we treated all members of our community with the respect and dignity and compassion that they deserve, there's just no way that we could justify the harm that's been done, and we would do absolutely everything that we could to keep them alive.
Senator Sanders, harm reduction must be at the center of how we heal this crisis. How would you shift the focus
from one of stigma and criminalization to harm reduction? And then also, what is your overall plan to stop the 70,000 overdose deaths a year and collateral damage that is caused by this disease?
Thank you very much for those questions. I am more than aware that while my state of Vermont has been hit hard by the opioid epidemic, New Hampshire has suffered even more. You've raised a number of issues. Let me try to answer them as comprehensively as I can. For a start, I happen to believe that addiction is a health issue, not a criminal issue. And it is totally absurd that we are attempting to deal with this epidemic by jailing people rather than treating them. Second of all, my Medicare for All proposal finally does what should have been done in this country a long, long time ago. And it says health care, including mental health care, including addiction treatment, is a human right, not a privilege. And that when people get sick, they have a right to get the medical care that they need now, not 3 months from now. Furthermore, you raise quite appropriately the intersectionality of criminal justice and addiction and healthcare in general. We have introduced what I believe is the most comprehensive criminal justice reform program of any candidate out there. We are going to end the war on drugs, which has destroyed so many lives in this country. And among many other things, we are going to legalize the possession of marijuana.
As a follow-up, if we could just ask, what would you do as far as harm reduction? There are a lot of different things out there available, and we're wondering what your stance is on that.
Well, the stand is, if I understand the question correctly, is to provide treatment for people who need treatment. All right, Vermont has done better than many states, but we have got to do more, and certainly the rest of the country has got to do more. As both of you have indicated, quite correctly, addiction is a very difficult disease to overcome, whether it is alcohol addiction, opioid addiction, or any kind of addiction. People need support, they need treatment, and they must get that treatment when they need it, regardless of their income. Throwing people into jail only makes a bad situation worse.
Thank you, Senator Sanders. Next up, we have healthcare and big pharma.
You don't have enough time for my answer to that question.
I'm Tanya Vyhovsky from Essex, Vermont, and a member of Rights and Democracy and People's Action. And I graduated college before the Affordable Care Act, and I was uninsurable due to pre-existing health conditions. And while the ACA has saved my life, it isn't enough. I'm now one of millions of underinsured Americans with chronic health conditions requiring lifelong treatment, including the need for epinephrine. 3 years ago, the pharmaceutical company Mylan raised the price of epinephrine over 400%. And soon after that, Blue Cross Blue Shield changed that medication from a tier 1 that I paid $10 for to a tier 3 that now cost me over $500. Since then, I've had 39 reactions totaling over $20,000 in epinephrine alone. Right now, every EpiPen in my home is expired because I can't afford to replace them. And they seem to still work, but what about when they don't, or when I run out? My life is at stake every day because a corporation chose to prioritize their profits over people's lives. I'm a social worker. I see the impacts of this greed every day. I support people who can't afford their deductibles and copays, and so they don't go to the doctor. I support people who've become homeless because they got sick. In this country, we pay more for health care than anywhere else, and our outcomes are much worse. This is not the best health care system. It's not even a civilized health care system. It's far past time that people came before profits, and greed was not the law of the land. Every day I see another story of death and financial ruin while I'm sitting in the parking lot of the ED knowing that I need treatment, but even with my insurance, it will cost me thousands, so I don't go. And next time, I might be one of the casualties of their greed.
Thank you for that. And I'm Tristram Patuan. I'm a leader with the New Hampshire Youth Movement, and I grew up in our state capital of Concord. Following a car accident in 2005, my mother was prescribed the painkiller OxyContin, which is patented by Purdue Pharma. And like many other working class people in this country, she wasn't able to keep up with the quickly rising prices of her prescription. She, like many others, turned to heroin as an alternative to manage that addiction. And I saw her fail time and time again to get the adequate treatment she deserved, because for years, the big pharmaceutical industry has been buying out our politicians to deregulate the sectors they profit from at the expense of working class families like mine. So we support Medicare for All, which you have been a leader on, but I just want to know more about what you're going to do to hold Big Pharma and the medical industrial complex accountable for the lives lost, and not to ensure that not one more life dies from their greed.
All right, thank you both for your wonderful question. I'm afraid you're going to have to put that sign down. It's going to take me a little bit longer. So they're trying to keep me on a tight time limit. This one requires a few more minutes. So let me tell you what no other politician will tell you. And that not only is the pharmaceutical industry extraordinarily greedy, that goes without saying. Last year, they made $69 billion in profit at a time when 1 out of 5 Americans cannot afford the medicine their doctors prescribe. You talked about your instance, your situation. A few months ago, I took a group of Midwesterners over the Canadian border to buy insulin, all right? Who knows what the differential in price for insulin was in Canada and the United States? Anyone know? 1/10 of the price. So it is not only that we have an industry that is incredibly greedy, they are corrupt, and let's be clear about it. They are engaging in widespread price fixing and collusion. All right? We will have an attorney general that will go after them in a way they have never seen for ripping off the American people. Right now, and I forgot to mention it in the previous question, but you all know this. Right now, the drug companies that produced the opioids are now being sued by attorneys general all over this country for billions of dollars. Do you know why they are being sued? I want you all to hear this. They are being sued for aggressively selling a product that they knew got people addicted. And they hired more and more salesmen to go out and sell that product so they can make more money as people became addicted and hundreds of thousands of people died. That is criminal. That is criminal activity, and we will hold those CEOs accountable. Furthermore, under Medicare for All, so we are clear, not only do we end all premiums and copayments, all deductibles and out-of-pocket expenses, but under our proposal, nobody in America, because we're going to lower drug prices significantly in a number of ways, nobody in America will pay more than $200 a year for the prescription drugs they need. That make your life a little bit easier? As previously stated, there is a reason why we pay by far the highest prices in the world for prescription drugs. and that is that the pharmaceutical industry has spent, as you have indicated, billions of dollars, some $4 billion in the last 20 years, buying politicians through campaign contributions and through intensive lobbying efforts. That will end when we are in the White House. Thank you so much. Great job.
I have one more question. A pharma public option could help lower drug prices, insure against dangerous drug shortages, and reignite a declining pharma innovation in this country. Polling shows bipartisan support for public production of essential medication. Would you support a public option on pharmaceuticals?
Absolutely. If I understand, look, we're not going to be, I don't have to explain to people how important prescription drugs are. They are life and death, okay? So do you think we're going to sit back and allow the pharmaceutical industry to engage in price fixing, holding the American people hostage? Of course, we're not going to do that. We're going to make sure that we produce the best quality medicine in the world at the lowest possible price.
Thank you so much, Senator Sanders. Now we're going to hear some stories and questions related to the climate crisis, the fossil fuel industry, the need to transition to a regenerative economy, and our desire to push back against sacrifice zones.
Hi, my name is Laura Lynch, and I'm a member of Rights and Democracy New Hampshire and People's Actions. I moved to Temple, New Hampshire a few years ago because I wanted to live in a more peaceful, cleaner environment and have a safe place for my grandchildren to visit. What a shock I received when I found out that an 80,000 horsepower compressor station was going to be built a quarter of a mile from my home. As a person who suffers COPD, this scared the hell out of me. I needed to do something to help stop this, so I joined the Temple Ad Hoc Pipeline Advisory Committee. Liberty Utilities and Kinder Morgan thought we were all a bunch of ignorant hicks because we lived in the rural area of New Hampshire. We were called the low kill zone. They told us that the compressor station would not affect the area at all and that it was safe for our air, water, land, and health. Well, we did our research and talked to other parts of the country who already had these massive compressor stations. And we learned how they were destroying their land, their air, water, and livelihoods. So we put on our activist hats and got organized. Working together, we were able to stop this Kinder Morgan project, but our work is far from over. Senator Sanders, if elected president, what will you do to limit or eliminate the fossil fuel industry's ability to undermine the rights of communities, soil, and transition us from the extractive economy that we now live under to a regenerative economy that prioritizes people and the planet over profit?
Let me be as clear as I can be. And that is, climate change is real. Climate change is caused by human activity. And climate change, not only in New Hampshire or Vermont, but all over this country and all over this world today, is bringing about devastating harm. And what the scientists tell us, and as president, unlike Mr. Trump, I will listen to the scientists. What they tell us is if we do not act aggressively in transforming our energy system away from fossil fuel to energy efficiency and sustainable energy, the planet that we will be leaving our children and grandchildren and future generations will be increasingly unhealthy and uninhabitable. And unbelievably, we are already seeing the changes, not over a 1,000-year period, we are seeing it almost a daily basis. We're seeing what's going on in California right now, today, uncontrolled forest fires. We're seeing what happened in the Bahamas a few months ago. We're seeing unprecedented heat waves in Europe, drought in Australia. I have introduced, to answer your question, the most comprehensive climate change plan ever introduced by any candidate for president. And this is a plan consistent with the Green New Deal. This is a plan that will create up to 20 million good-paying jobs as we tell the fossil fuel industry, in no uncertain terms, that their short-term profits are not more important than the future of our planet.
Good afternoon. My name is Luz Velez, and I am from Buffalo, New York, a member of Our City Action and People's Action, and I'm going to sit. For a long time, I have been experiencing a lot of health problems because of the environment. As a single mom, I lived in too many apartments that were substandard housing for anyone to have to endure. So my family said, either you find your dream house, because we're not moving you anymore. I was like, okay. I found my dream house, and it turned into a nightmare. There was no insulation. I walked around my house in hoodies and sweats, and that's fine for an adult when you know you got to pay the bill. But when you got to tell your kid and everybody who comes to visit, y'all better dress warm, because my house, I'm not raising the heat past 60 or 65. So I couldn't afford it. Later on, I became ill due to the toxic environment that I lived in. I've had a lot of infections, a lot of breathing disorders, and it has to do also with, an unhealthy home, because in Buffalo we have one of the second oldest housing stock. So obviously people know what that kind of means, but for a lot of people, I live in a frontline community. I'm tired of being the victim of a frontline community because of who I am, an indigenous Puerto Rican, and the health disparities that come with living in an unhealthy environment. I lived maybe a couple of minutes away from the Peace Bridge, which is the connection from Buffalo to Canada, and that caused a lot of emissions, idling of trucks and what have you. And when you breathe and suck it in, you have a community that has a lot of rate of asthma and bronchitis. So I'm tired of these corporate developers and businesses profiting over making me sick and making my community ill. So when we talk about sacrifice zones, for those people who don't know, those are people who are in collateral damage, okay, in surrounding and being in polluted and poisoned places. So because I'm low income and I'm a person of color and my residency is so close to all these polluted areas, I want to know, will you support a people's no sacrifice zone bill? And mandating existing sacrifice zones, and also, more importantly, not reparations in terms of money, but reparations in terms of my community, and in terms of the abandonment that we feel because of the environmental racism and the disproportionate levels of pollution, because it's not fair. It is not fair that I can't sit here, that I have to stop and start and breathe and shake, and like everybody else, we're sick and tired. Thank you.
There are approximately 100,000 people who die every single year from environmental toxicity and environmental degradation. And when we talk about the Green New Deal, one of the things we put right up front are billions and billions of dollars to go into those communities like yours that have been hit hardest by the fossil fuel industry and the pollution that those people are experiencing. So as we transform our energy system away from fossil fuel, we are going to pay a special attention to the low-income communities, the communities of color that we know have been so hard hit. A couple of weeks ago, I was in Queens, New York, near a low-income, very large low-income housing project. And I was told there, as I am told all over the country, that the rates of asthma, among other illnesses that children suffer, is always dependent upon the income of the communities in which they live. It is not a secret, not just in New York, not just in New Hampshire, anyplace else. It is not a secret that you'll find fossil fuel plants located not in the wealthy communities, but in the lowest income communities in America. So we're going to pay a special attention to those low-income communities, communities of color that have suffered additional illness as we transform our energy system away from fossil fuel. Thanks for the question.
Thank you so much, Senator Sanders. Next up, we're going to talk about housing and the needs for a homes guarantee.
Good job.
My name is Jubilee McGill, and I am a Vermont member of Rights and Democracy and People's Action. I was a young single mom struggling with major depression, anxiety, and childhood trauma. My credit and housing references were destroyed due to domestic violence, and a second bout of homelessness in my short life was imminent. My experience is not uncommon in our country, but unlike so many, I was lucky to get connected to our county parent-child center. There, we receive support, connection to services, and help getting into a subsidized apartment. With a safe, affordable place to live, holistic support and services, we thrived. I went to school, I earned a degree, and I am now the senior property manager for the same housing trust that housed me 11 years ago. 12 million households in our country pay over 50% of their income towards rent. Next month, I am leasing up a woman who has paid 60% of her very tiny Social Security disability income for over 6 years since getting on our wait list in 2013. My whole trajectory in life, as well as my daughter's, was changed by finding affordable housing and supportive services, but too many are being forced to make decisions like paying their medical bills or making rent, putting food on their table, or keeping a roof over their head. We know that you support a homes guarantee, including 12 million social housing units, national rent control, tenant protections, and an end to real estate and land speculation. So my question for you is, why do you support a homes guarantee, and how will your homes guarantee be a racial justice intervention?
As a nation, we are going to have to fundamentally change our national priorities. So at a time of massive income and wealth inequality, we're not going to give more tax breaks to billionaires and large profitable corporations. We're going to raise their taxes. And we're going to use some of that revenue to understand that housing is a human right, that it is basically insane, and I can't use a better word than that tonight we're going to have in this country 500,000 people either sleeping out on the streets or in emergency shelters, and as you've indicated, many millions paying 50% or more of their limited incomes for housing. If you're spending 50% of your income on housing, how do you have money to do anything else? So what we understand is that when we change our national priorities, we are going to build millions of units of affordable housing in this country, and not just affordable housing, but low-income housing. You mentioned the Housing Trust Fund. You know who was mayor of Burlington when the first city in America developed the Housing Trust Fund? And that is a good model that we're going to take, that we put into our comprehensive housing plan. Second of all, I'm proud that for many years in this country, Congress did nothing in terms of the low-income housing crisis. And I'm proud to tell you that some years ago, working with Congresswoman Barbara Lee of California, we passed legislation for the Low-Income Housing Trust Fund, which is now bringing not enough, but some money into Vermont, New Hampshire, and states all over the country. So, housing is a human right. You cannot live with dignity if you're living in substandard housing, if you are spending 50% of your income. We're going to build that housing, and we're going to put people to work doing that, and we are going to retrofit older housing stock in this country.
My name is Jess Valero. I'm 22 and I live in Portland, Maine. I'm a member of Maine People's Alliance and People's Action, and like so many others in this country, I've experienced homelessness. When I first became homeless, I was 18 and I was fresh out of state custody in Connecticut. I was dropped off at the Lewiston Library in my penguin pajamas and left to find my way. 2 weeks later, I was assaulted by a 45-year-old man, which resulted in me being sent to Portland to the teen shelter. 2 shelters in 2 different towns in 2 months in a state I didn't know. At the beginning of 2017, I was human trafficked. When I escaped, I came to Portland to the teen shelter for the second time. 2 weeks later, on my 21st birthday, the teen shelter made me my favorite cake and kicked me to the streets. There are 550,000 people like Jubilee and I on the streets as we speak that are suffering with no home and no hope. My question for you is, what is your plan to address youth homelessness, and more specifically, address the problem of kids in foster care ending up on the streets long term?
My plan, which is, I believe, the most comprehensive plan introduced in this campaign, says that in the richest country in the history of the world, we should not be hearing the story that you just told us. All right? Yes. And that is why we also understand that it is not just a question of building low-income and affordable housing, which we must do. It is also providing the ancillary social services that give people the hope and the support that they need. So all that I can tell you is that rebuilding our housing stock, building over 10 million new units of housing, ending homelessness in America for young people, for any other group of people, is an enormously high priority for my administration.
Thank you, Senator Sanders. That's great. Our 5th issue this afternoon relates to work rights and the needs of workers in our shifting economy.
Hello, Mr. Sanders, Senator Sanders. My name is Maribel Rodriguez. I am from Waterbury, Connecticut.
And you brought along your fan club, I see.
I sure did. I work as an organizer for New England Healthcare District 1199, and I am also on the board of Connecticut Citizens Action Group. Like too many people in this country, for far too long, I have lived from paycheck to paycheck. I worked in a nursing home for 30 years as a certified nurse's aide, a CNA. When I started, I was 18 years old and started getting paid $5.50 an hour with poor working conditions and no benefits. A few years later, I was asked to join the union, and I did. My financial life improved, and now I have 30 years in my pension, so I can retire with dignity. I now work doing the same work for others. I work with the union to improve the lives of others by helping them find their own voice. Although we continue to fight, the middle class is shrinking, and working poor families continue to struggle while corporations are getting tax cuts, and the American dream is disappearing. There was a time when you can come to this country and can get a job and become part of the middle class, thanks to unions and organizations like People's Action. Now people, unfortunately, have to work full-time and part-time jobs to be able to provide for their families. I know people that have 3 jobs. My question is, Senator Sanders, what policies or plans do you have to continue to help push for a living wage that take people out of poverty and also help build the middle class?
Thank you for that very important question. As somebody who grew up in a working class family, I know what it is like to live without the kind of income that the family needs. And that is why I have introduced the key legislation in Congress to raise the minimum wage in this country to a living wage of at least $15 an hour. And that is, in fact, a minimum wage. I'm not here to tell anybody $15 an hour is something that you're going to live in luxury with. And certainly in communities where the cost of living is very high, $15 an hour doesn't do you much in getting the housing that you need or the health care that you may need. Second of all, we will continue the fight for equal pay for equal work. Women should not be making 80 cents on the dollar, and minority women are making a lot less than that. Thirdly, I have introduced the most progressive labor law reform legislation in the modern history of this country. You talk about seeing your life improve by being able to benefit from union negotiated contracts. Problem in America today, and one of the reasons where you are right, why the middle class is declining, it parallels the decline of the trade union movement in America. So here is the truth. The truth is that millions of Americans want to join unions because they understand you get better wages and better benefits. But employers are violating the law and making it very difficult for workers to join those unions. Workers get fired when they want to join a union. Workers get threatened. You want to join a union? That's great. We're moving to Mexico. Workers get taken into back rooms and get propagandized about unions in a negative way. So what we have done, understanding, as you've just said, that we cannot grow the middle class until we grow the union movement, this is what we have done. Our legislation says that if 50% of workers in a bargaining unit plus one sign a card that they want to join a union, they will have a union. And we expect that that legislation will double the number of union workers in this country in a 4-year period. And second of all, if a company refuses to negotiate a first contract, that company will be severely penalized. Thirdly, when we talk about the Green New Deal and we talk about rebuilding our crumbling infrastructure, we are talking about creating many millions of good-paying jobs. So we're talking about job creation, our roads, our bridges, our water systems, transforming our energy system. We're talking about seeing more workers become child care workers because we have a child care crisis in America. We're going to pay our teachers a living wage of at least $60,000 a year. So we have a comprehensive program to put people to work at good wages, doing the jobs that this country desperately needs to see done.
Thank you so much, Senator Sanders. My name's Jan Schaefer. I'm a member of the Communication Workers Union. I'm also on the board of Rights and Democracy here in New Hampshire, and we're affiliated with People's Action. And I think, you know, what you just talked about is wonderful, particularly your discussion about the new Green Deal and your vision for the jobs that are going to come from that. we'd like to give you another or I'd like to give you a chance to expand on that a little bit. We've, Rights and Democracy and our national partners, we just released something called a new social contract. And it's for workers. It calls for expanding the right to organize, which you just talked about, and the ability to allow for sectoral bargaining. It calls for just cause employment, a federal jobs guarantee, democracy at work, meaning the opportunity for worker ownership, collective ownership, and guarantees to basic needs. Could you talk a little bit about those expanded labor rights and how you see them come to fruition? Thank you.
I agree with everything that you said.
Okay.
All right, look, what Jan is talking about, I think, are two, and actually in our various proposals, we include literally everything that you talked about. We're talking about two broad issues. One is economic, and that is the fact that in the richest country in the history of the world, half of our people should not be living paycheck to paycheck. 500,000 people tonight should not be sleeping out on the streets. We should not have the highest rate of childhood poverty of almost any major nation on earth. Millions of elderly people should not be in a position where they cannot afford the medicine that they need. That's one part. But there is another part, and Jan goes a little bit deeper, and saying that a job should be more than just a paycheck. And right now what's happening is people all over this country, they go to work because they need the money. That's understandable. We've all done that. But what I want to see happen is the empowerment of workers. I want to see workers have a say in the jobs that they do, not be treated, and not simply be treated as cogs in a machine, expendable. All right, so what does that mean? And Jan touched on some of these issues. It means that workers in large corporations should have a seat, more than a seat, 45% representation on the board of directors. So right now, you got large corporations that may be employing hundreds of thousands of workers, and these Wall Street executives get together in a room and they say, hey, we can save $5 by moving to China or Mexico. Hey, let's do it. We can make billions by providing stock buybacks to the stockholders and the CEOs while lowering wages for workers. What say do the workers have in that whole process? Nothing at all. So we have a proposal that would give 45% of the representation on large corporations to workers. Not a radical idea. It exists in Germany already. And second of all, we have a proposal that says 20% of all stocks in major corporations should go to workers as well.
Thank you, Senator Sanders. Our final question and stories before closing remarks are going to be about asylum issues, immigration, and the border.
Good afternoon, Senator. My name is Pablo, and I'm a 19-year-old asylum seeker from Nicaragua and a member of New Hampshire Youth Movement. My country has for many years been victimized by a cruel dictatorship that has been accused by human rights organizations of torture and execution. In April of 2018, continuous protests broke out, and I became a political activist and joined thousands of people in the streets, demanding justice, equality, and more opportunities for all. The government response to these non-violence protests was lethal. Many young protesters went missing. Sadly and tragically, some were found floating dead in the river or left at the local dump with a bullet in their head. In May, I received my first death threat from an armed pro-government group. I went into hiding and feared for my life every day. If I wanted to have a future, I had no choice to abandon my homeland and to seek a new home where I could pursue my dreams of being a journalist and still fight for my country on the outside. America was my dream, a place where I could be free to speak my mind and fight for my beliefs. I arrived in the US on September 7th of 2018. While I'm so grateful to be here, I was shocked to witness hatred in this country, specifically against people like me. Most Americans are from other lands and have immigrated here to find a better life like I did. Being an immigrant is challenging. I had to leave behind my family, my language, my way of life. As immigrants, we believe that in America, we can build a better life for ourselves and our families. We are not a threat. We are strong. We are brave. We are courageous. And we are willing to make a huge sacrifice in the hope of a better future. The asylum process has helped thousands of people like me escape certain death and build a better future to start over and to be safe. But the Trump administration has destroyed the asylum process. But my question for you is, how would you rebuild the asylum process, specifically for people from countries where the U.S. foreign policy has negatively impacted their lives?
Well, thank you for that question. And let me just tell you that I am the son of an immigrant myself. So the immigrant experience is not something that's foreign to me. My dad came from Poland at 17 to flee poverty and anti-Semitism, arrived in this country without a nickel in his pocket. So I know a little bit about that. The first thing that I would say in response to your question is on day one, we will end the demonization of the immigrant community that Trump has fostered. We have a president who is trying to divide our people up based on our immigrant status, based on the color of our skin, our sexual orientation, our religion. This is a president that will do exactly the opposite, bring our people together. Second of all, on day one, we will provide the legal status to the 1.8 million young people eligible for the DACA program that Trump took away. We will move to comprehensive immigration reform and a path towards citizenship for the 11 million undocumented. And to answer your question, we will develop a humane border policy based on international asylum standards, okay? And what we will never do is snatch babies from the arms of their mothers. We will not break up families. We will not throw children into cages. But what we will do is hire hundreds and hundreds of new administrative judges so we don't have the incredible backlog we have right now in asylum processes.
Senator Sanders, my name is Sebastian Fuentes, and I'm a member of Rights for Democracy as well. A few times a year, Border Patrol, they set up highway checkpoints in New Hampshire. They mostly detain people for minor possession of marijuana with the help from the state police. Very few are immigration-related issues. As some of you know, Border Patrol has jurisdiction over 100 miles from the border, Canada and Mexico, but also over the coast of the Atlantic Ocean and the Pacific Ocean. With that said, they cover the entire state of Maine, the entire state of New Hampshire, the entire state of Massachusetts, 80% of New York, the whole state of Connecticut, New Jersey as well. They have shown a major lack of compassion and training. They are selective with who and what kind of vehicle they stopped. Even though they say they don't do it, if you're a person of color, you get pulled over, and if you have an accent, you get double inspected. They spread fear into communities and cause severe damage to the trust of the communities should have to law enforcement. So our question is, Senator Sanders, if you become president of this country, will you bring back the authority of Customs and Border Patrol Agency back to 25 miles instead of 100?
I'm not going to give you a specific answer. I have to study it more. But I am absolutely concerned about the terrorization that is going on throughout this country. What I will tell you is that we're going to end the ICE raids that are going on right now that are terrorizing communities. And I share your concern about the overreaching about the Customs and Border people. If I may just take your point and stretch it a little bit, and I want to make this point. I was in Los Angeles a couple of months ago talking to some teachers. The school district in Los Angeles is, I believe, 90% children of color, okay? Many of them are from families that are undocumented. And what the teachers were telling me, the kids there are living in fear every day, living in fear. It's hard for us who were born in this country to imagine that. These kids are worried that when they come home from school, their parents, their mom and dad may not be there. How would you like to grow up under that type of traumatic situation? So the main thing that we will do, going back to your question, is we will end the kind of terror and fear that is being instilled in so many people in this country. That we will end, absolutely.
Thank you so much, Senator Sanders. We want to thank you for coming today. Very truly appreciate your time here and listening to our stories and answering our questions. As we close, we want to talk about movement politics and hear about you and how your campaign relate to this, okay? Movement politics is a way of doing politics and running campaigns that is transformational rather than transactional. To us, movement politics is about elevating people power versus the power of the concentrated wealth, using bold issue agendas and narrative to inspire people versus poll-tested issues and reactive, watered-down messages of political consultants. And thirdly, confronting Trump's xenophobia and speaking to voters on race, class, and gender versus running and hiding from these dynamics. So Senator Sanders, in your closing remarks, would you take 2 minutes to answer the following question? Please, do you believe in these principles, and how are you using your campaign to strengthen the movement?
Thank you for that very important question. And by the way, thank you for all your important questions. You know, I do a lot of forums. I do a lot of events. As you know, when you run for president, that's what you do. And very often, the questions are not as cogent and fundamental as the questions you are asking here today. So I appreciate that you're willing to address the major crises facing this country. And you've just touched on one of them. As some of you may know, the message of our campaign is not me, us. All right, now what do I mean by that? It's exactly what you're talking about. And let me be very honest. What I have said 1,000,000 times is that no president of the United States, not Bernie Sanders or anybody else, can do it alone. We are taking on the incredible power of Wall Street, of the drug companies, the insurance companies, the fossil fuel industry, the prison industrial complex, the military industrial complex. That is unbelievable power. And the only way that real change has ever taken place in this country is not when somebody on top did it, is when millions of people stood up and fought for justice. So this campaign absolutely believes that we have got to build an unprecedented grassroots movement, not only to defeat the most dangerous president in modern American history. That goes without saying. But we need that movement to transform our economy, our energy system, and our government. And the only way we do that is when millions of people are prepared to stand up and fight. At the end of the day, the 1% is enormously powerful. No ifs, buts, and maybes. But you know what? The 99%, when we stand together, is even more powerful. That's the theme of our campaign.
Thank you so much, Senator Sanders, for meeting with People's Action in Iowa, for joining by video last week in Nevada, and now being here with us in New Hampshire. Let's give it up again for the senator.